welcome to Education Today. I'm your host, Kitty Kelly Epstein. Today we'll be discussing some issues that are intimately youth-related, but not classroom-focused as many of our other programs have been. We'll be talking with a woman who has devoted her life to building a better community, and she's going to be talking to us about two areas of work that are related to young people. The first is the whole issue of police accountability. As most of you know, youth in cities in particular have more contact with the police department than just about anybody else, and sometimes they are quite unhappy with how that contact goes down. So our guest, Rashidah Grinage, has spent a lot of time on working on issues of police accountability. She's also working with youth directly on their policy creation around public safety, and she's working with youth on issues that have to do with food production, food for their families, and how to be a sustainable city in terms of the way we use the food that's already produced in our city. I want to welcome Rashidah Grinage, an Oakland resident, an activist, and a member of Pueblo to Education Today. Welcome.
Thanks, Kitty. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And we will be, in a few minutes, taking your telephone calls at 510-848-4425. That's 510-848-4425. I want to ask Rashidah a few questions myself, but I know that you'll want to interact with her also. So write down the number and call in a few minutes, and we'll be happy to let you dialogue with us also. I got to know Rashidah 4 or 5 years ago when she served on one of the 41 task forces that were organized by Mayor Dellums to make recommendations about city policies. Rashidah was on a task force on police issues, which recommended that the city civilianize its process for taking complaints from the residents about police. Now, I'm sure people know that most cities do have complaints about police, and most of them have some process for dealing with it. Oakland's has seemed not to be entirely satisfactory, and so Rashidah, can you tell us something about what civilianization means and why it would make a difference?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we learned in 2005 when we did a survey of 1,000 Oakland residents about their experiences with police, of those respondents who indicated that their experience had been negative rather than positive, when we asked them if they had filed a complaint about what had happened, we found that only 1 in 10 had actually filed a complaint. And when we asked why, the most common response was something along the lines of, what for? What good would it do? Didn't think it would make a difference. So we then understood clearly that the idea of going to the police, namely going to internal affairs to file a complaint about the police, for most people is an option that isn't worth pursuing because of the feeling that the police are not likely to investigate complaints objectively and without bias. And so we thought at that point, and if we're going to get a more accurate understanding in the city about what's going on in the streets of Oakland between police and residents, we need a better system of accountability, which means we need a better complaint process. We need a process that folks will feel that if they file a complaint about what happened to them, that it will be taken seriously, that they will be dealt with respectfully, that they will not be tried to, they won't be made to feel that they shouldn't be filing the complaint, that it's frivolous, and folks need to feel that it's worth their while to file a complaint because it will be investigated thoroughly and objectively, and there may in fact be consequences to the officers if it's determined that they acted improperly. So that means that we have to establish a process where citizens can file a complaint to civilians and not to the police. Now, we do have, and have had for many years, a Citizens Police Review Board, which does accept complaints, but most Oakland residents, and this is something else we found out in our survey, most Oakland residents don't know that we have it. The Citizens Police Review Board, or CPRB, takes in only about 80 complaints a year compared to about 800 that are filed with internal affairs. So our thought was, well, the obvious thing to do is not have two different options. Have one place for folks to go, and that's to the CPRB. So close internal affairs to citizen complaints, redirect the officers to do police functions, and have the CPRB as the only place to file complaints. And we feel that once that happens, more people, especially young people, will feel motivated to actually file complaints when they have had unpleasant or inappropriate experiences with police officers, and that will give us a much better sense as a city and as a community of what is really happening on the streets of Oakland.
And you feel that this would also save money to have these intakes civilianized, right? Because now it's a uniformed officer, which may be more uncomfortable for the resident, and also I believe they're paid more than a civilian staff person, even a full-time one. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the key issues for a lot of folks in Oakland. We are indeed wasting a lot of money. Officers are paid really twice as much as civilian investigators, so we're paying 2 times what we should be paying, not to mention benefits and pension and other perks that officers get that civilians don't get. So yeah, it is a far more cost-effective way to process complaints, to have citizens doing the investigating rather than sworn officers.
And you've had some success with this proposal, right?
We've been trying to get this done now for a good many years, and in 2009, we did in fact persuade the City Council to adopt this proposal in principle, subject to their being able to find the funding that they would need to hire all of the additional CPRB investigative staff that they would need in order to be able to take on these additional complaints. Last year, we were fortunate that, actually it was this year in June, the city passed their 2-year budget, and we were fortunate that they decided to include the funding for these additional hires in the second year of the 2-year budget. So we are anticipating that by next year at this time, we will start to see coming online a great many, probably somewhere between 8 and 10 additional Citizens Police Review Board investigators, and at that point, or shortly thereafter, they will close internal affairs to citizen complaints, and all of the complaints will go to the civilian agency.
And this doesn't mean there won't be any internal investigation. It'll be internal investigation that's generated within the police department, but that which comes from the public will go through the Citizens Police Review Board, but there will be an investigation process of the police department itself.
Correct. Internal affairs will stay to investigate accidents that involve OPD vehicles, internally generated complaints, and they will undoubtedly continue to do parallel investigations for high-profile cases.
So do you think that more youth will use the complaint process if they're making their complaint to a civilian resident?
That is one of the motivating factors behind our pushing this proposal, that we believe that once we can get this in place and say to young people, you don't have to go to the police department to file your complaint. You don't go there at all. You go to civilians to file your complaint. We believe that we will be able to do much more effective outreach to young people and to encourage them and motivate them to do that.
So stay tuned, our listeners, over the next year or two to see whether this works. Now, there's another aspect to the police department issues and their relationship to youth that you have also been following, right? And that is the oversight process, the negotiated settlement agreement that the Oakland Police Department is supposed to be following based on the Riders case, which took place several years ago. And I know you do oversight on that. I wonder if you can fill us in. I'm sure our listeners followed it probably when the Riders case happened and there were many complaints about police department behavior. But this oversight by the courts has been going on for a long time. And I wonder if you could explain why it's been so long and what your impression is. And I want to give our number again because we're going to take calls soon. 510-848-4425. That's 510-848-4425. You're listening to Education Today on KPFA.
Yes, the writers' negotiated settlement agreement is usually referred to by its acronym NSA. It is now, I think we're now in our 9th year. It was supposed to have been a 5-year completion. It's a set of reforms that were mandated as a condition of settling the writer's case, which was a multi-million-dollar case for the wrongdoing of, I think it was 21 subject officers on behalf of over 100 plaintiffs. And this is a series of reforms that were mandated that the police department was supposed to have completed, and they didn't. And it has been extended and extended and extended again. The judge, federal judge Thelton Henderson, has come close to pulling the trigger on ending this and putting the department under federal receivership. He has grown extremely frustrated with the slow pace of the Oakland Police Department's compliance, and of course one of the areas that they're still not compliant in is in fact internal affairs. They are still not complying with the standards that were set forth in the document, and they've been dragging their heels. And I think that, we are now, I think, in our 4th or at least 3rd police chief. I think it began under Richard Word, then we had Wayne Tucker, and now of course we've got Anthony Batts, and we're still not done with it. And I think the plaintiff's attorneys in this, Burris and Shannon, are very, very frustrated. I know that Mayor Kwan is extremely concerned about the department falling into receivership, so I know that she's doing her utmost to get OPD to comply.
So I want to ask you a little about the comparison of Oakland and other districts in relation to these police issues, but before that I want to let one of our listeners ask a question. We have Chris from Oakland with us. Welcome to Education Today.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I was enjoying listening to the speaker, and I was curious about the aspect of hiring civilian experts to work with these young people. Can you say anything about the backgrounds of these people? Do they come from a legal background? Were they former police? Was some consideration given to their association with police officers? And then the second half of the question is, what outreach efforts will you have to make young people aware that these new principles and policies are in place to help them be more forthcoming?
Thank you. Great questions.
Absolutely. The qualifications for the civilian investigators, I think, are pretty straightforward and uniform and similar to other agencies throughout the country. I think typically the candidates come from a diverse background. Some of them are attorneys. Some of them have done private investigation work. Some of them come from other governmental agencies that do auditing or investigating. So there is a diversity of background, I think, but they've all done some sort of investigative work in the past. I don't think that they typically have a law enforcement background. I think typically they come from the private sector. I think that's kind of one of the critical elements that we're looking for in terms of public confidence in the objectivity of the investigations. As for the outreach, once this new system is in place, we are certainly planning a coherent outreach. I think we'll be using the work that we are already doing with young people and having them essentially be ambassadors to their fellow students. We'll be doing outreach through the All-City Council, which is kind of the combined student council for the entire school district, and we'll be working through schools, through counselors, and doing presentations, and really trying to get kids to encourage their peers and have them essentially carry the message as well as us carrying the message.
Thank you for that question, and I ought to say I think it's one of the benefits of the enormous number of nonprofits that Oakland has that are able to act in somewhat of an independent way in doing this type of outreach, because otherwise it becomes difficult. Young people, if it's done totally by the city, young people start wondering whether, this is just another setup, and you can't really have youth do it totally on their own, although I think there will be a huge network happen around the issue. It helps to have some kind of adult assistance. So, and your organization, you want to say a little bit about who your organization is?
Yeah. Well, we are People United for a Better Life in Oakland, Pueblo. We have been around since 1989. We're a multi-issue organization that is involved with advocating for minorities and low-income residents in Oakland, and certainly young people as well. People who typically don't have a very loud voice in City Hall and in decision-making. That's our constituency. And so we've done work around environmental justice. We've done work on health issues. Our kickoff was the campaign to get Alameda County to put on the ballot the lead abatement initiative called Lead Poisoning Prevention. It was successful. That program has been in place now for over 20 years, and it became a national model for other cities to follow. It offers free inspection to low-income families, particularly with children, small children, to determine whether there is lead on their property and in their home, and if there is, to abate it. It's a fantastic program, and that's kind of what kicked Pueblo off. And since then, we've done youth programs, we've done work around educational issues, and in the mid-90s, we began our campaign for community safety and police accountability.
So I wanted to ask you just a little bit more before moving on to some of your other projects, how Oakland relates. I mean, you've painted a pretty dismal picture of the reforms in oversight and police practices. And I wonder, first of all, if you could say, what's another issue besides internal affairs that is part of the negotiated settlement which has not been resolved? And then how do these issues compare to police departments in other cities?
Well, I think one of the other areas that they are not compliant in yet is so-called integrity testing, and also disciplinary policy is still a question.
So what does that mean? What is disciplinary?
Well, what it means is that discipline is not applied evenly and uniformly and equitably. That officers can be treated differently, possibly based on a number of factors. And so that was one of the earliest things that they took on. I think they brought in Dr. Samuel Walker, who's an expert in this sort of thing, to do consultation and to review their disciplinary policy. But as you know, having the policy is one thing and implementing it is another. And even though they have done a lot of changes and updates to their policies, the question about whether those policies are being implemented fairly and consistently is still at issue.
And I understand that just in the last few days, a police officer was rehired who had shot two people, and had actually been dismissed from the department, which is fairly unusual. There have been quite a lot of officer-involved shootings in the last, for many, many years, and generally people are not let go. So, and now this person who has been rehired.
Right, and not only this officer, but we've had other officers who may not have been involved in officer-related shootings, but may have been involved in other extremely inappropriate and possibly illegal activities, like walking off with drugs that were confiscated and that sort of thing, who have also gotten their jobs back. This is a huge problem. I don't know if it's unique to Oakland or if it's a California issue because of the penal code sections that protect them and give them all kinds of rights to appeal, termination, and other kinds of discipline. But they have certainly more than one bite at the apple when they are disciplined. And it is a huge problem for the city to be able to actually enforce the discipline that they have imposed.
So this decision was made by an arbitrator. This
Correct.
is not really the responsibility of either the department or the city, but I understand that Judge Henderson is, who's in charge, the judge in charge of the negotiated settlement, is wanting to look into this.
Yes, that's my understanding.
So many issues, and not all of them at a local level, but certainly many of them. And I understand that you're interested in getting young people involved in the policy dimension of looking at these police issues and other public safety issues also. How do you plan to do that?
Well, we are actually right now accepting applications for a new program that we're launching along with Concerned Black Men of Oakland. We're going to be working with them to kind of co-sponsor this project. It's called Oakland Young Policy Builders. And you can find a description of it on our website, www.peopleunited.org. It's on the homepage, and if you click on it, you'll see the description of the program as well as the application. We're hoping to gather somewhere around 10 young people from Oakland. We're going to try to make it as diverse a group as possible. And they are going to look at the survey that we did last year of 700 high school students about their experiences with police. We're going to look at the results of that survey, which, by the way, is also on our website, so folks can actually look at the survey and the report of the findings on our website. We're going to take the kids through these results and ask them to interpret them. Namely, what does it mean that far more female students felt comfortable approaching a police officer and asking for his or her name than male students did? That's just one of the findings in the report.
That's interesting.
And look at all of the responses to that survey from their fellow 700 students and start to come up with ideas for what can make a difference in the way police and young people interact. And we're going to take them through the process of developing policy proposals, and then we're going to be working with them on building advocacy skills, which will include developing presentation, and we're going to have some guest speakers, probably some decision makers, folks from the police department to interact with them, and eventually by next June it is our hope that we will be able to have these young people lobby and persuade the council, the mayor, and the police chief to accept the proposals that they come up with.
Seems like a wonderful program to me. A lot of us learned our policy making and advocacy skills in the movement, but I think young people, there is, of course, a movement now. I think there is an enormous need, though, for young people to be able to go in armed with not only the passion that they have around the movement, but also to be able to say, I can present you with this policy, this is what you should do. It's a whole other set of skills, which is really useful. We have a caller, Anna, from Oakland. Welcome to Education Today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I just want to make a comment that as a Latina living in Oakland, I like to think of people of color more than a minority, and I heard your guest refer to us as a minority, and when we start looking at population census and the fact that altogether, Asian Americans, African Americans, Latino Americans, we're starting to be a majority of California, and of course we need to have a voice. So first is that reframing, and really challenging us to go further than just thinking of us as a minority, but really looking at people of color as a majority in our state and in Oakland. Secondly, I just want to hear your thoughts about immigrant youth and the fact that they face double jeopardy and many times in Oakland, that when they get charged with a crime, some of the children are also becoming targets for deportation with ESCOM, Secure Community federal program that Obama is pushing forward. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that and what kinds of policy changes you aim to push forward on that front.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the correction, and I appreciate the reframing. So thanks for that. As for the young immigrants, we are, I think, probably going to have a representation of young people, at least one or two, who in this group group that we're forming, and no doubt that will be an issue that will come up, and that is no doubt something that we will find answers to and challenge the Oakland Police Department on in terms of what kinds of protections are there for young people if they are stopped by Oakland Police. What is the connection between Oakland Police and ICE? And we probably will also want to have somebody from El Centro Legal de la Raza, which is not very far from our office, probably to come and talk to young people about what they should do if they are stopped by an Oakland police officer.
I've heard you talk about another thing I was going to ask you about, which is the whole relationship between the way our funding is spent, and I'm very interested in this myself. Oakland voters have passed quite a lot of money for various youth-related programs, both Measure Y and OFCY, and Measure Y is the one that's more directly public safety related, and I think you've raised the question and are planning to study with many other people what are the quote best practices in relation to particularly youth programs, and are those really the ones we're doing? Because a lot of people are feeling an intense enforcement orientation, and as an educator, I don't find that most young people don't need enforcement if they have, this is my experience, if they have youth engagement workers who care about them and help them stay in school and do well in school and some source of income, a little small-time job, various things which probably could be a lot less expensive than the enforcement programs that involve a lot of jails and a lot of police and a lot of expensive other things. So I think you all are thinking about working in the direction of trying to come up with some kind of platform to say how the money should be spent. Is that
absolutely? We have no doubt, and I think everyone agrees to the fact that front-end spending is far more cost-effective than back-end spending. Back-end meaning law enforcement and incarceration. We know that investing in the kinds of support mechanisms that young people need when they need it to ensure that they have a path that they can follow that will keep them out of the line of fire and lead them into a productive life is far more cost effective, not to mention humane, than the kinds of spending that we are now doing, which are driven by the prison industrial complex and the extraordinary amount of money we spend on policing relative to the other needs in our community.
We have another, just time for a 30-second call and a 30-second answer. Janet from Oakland, welcome to Education Today.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to piggyback on the last caller's bringing up that it's not just Asian Americans and African Americans and Latino Americans. It's also Arab Americans. They need to be included in this mix too.
Thank you. Good point. And some other groups that we're actually don't name frequently enough either. Oakland has one of the largest populations of Native American Indian children in the schools, and actually as the first urban Indian center ever in the United States was built in Oakland. So you're absolutely right. 93% of the kids, last time I checked the statistics in the Oakland Public Schools, were not white. So the distinct minority in the Oakland Public Schools is white kids, and so we need a system that deals better with that, both in terms of who we employ as teachers and police and all sorts of other